following content examines a real criminal case involving violence and loss of life. Out of respect for the victims and their families, viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Come in here. Laura, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what's happened. It doesn't matter what type of trouble. There's nothing we can't fix together.
September 13th, 2017. Noon. Damascus, Maryland. A Montgomery County search and rescue team pushes deeper into a remote farm property. They're following tire tracks, fresh tracks, and the cadaver dogs won't stop pulling toward a wooded clearing ahead. What they find in that shallow grave will confirm a family's worst nightmare, and expose a secret so calculated, so methodical, that even the detectives who've been tracking this case for 9 days can barely comprehend it. The man who stood before cameras just 2 days ago, tearfully begging for his girlfriend's safe return, had already buried her body in the exact spot where investigators now stand. Welcome to True Crime Mind Studio. Tonight we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it. To understand how we arrived at that moment in the woods, we need to go back to where the story really begins. Because the woman buried in that shallow grave wasn't just a victim. She was a beloved teacher, a daughter, an expectant mother. And the man who put her there had spent years perfecting the art of deception. September 5th, 2017. 8 days before police would make their grim discovery. It's the first day of the school year at Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland. Laura Wallen's students waited in her classroom. Their beloved social studies teacher, named Teacher of the Year just 1 year earlier, never arrived. She hadn't called in sick, hadn't requested a substitute. She had simply vanished. Laura Wallen was 31 years old. Born and raised in the suburbs of Montgomery County, Maryland, she had dedicated her life to education. Those who knew her described a woman who led with compassion and believed in the potential of every student who walked through her door. Her father, Mark Wallen, would later tell reporters that Laura considered herself a work in progress. She had an ability to see the amazing potential in everyone around her. It was the hallmark of her teaching career. In the summer of 2017, Laura had every reason to be excited. A new school year was approaching, but there was something else. She was 4 months pregnant, expecting a baby boy she planned to name Reed. The father was her boyfriend of several years, Tyler Tessier. They had known each other since 2010. Their relationship had been tumultuous, marked by frequent breakups and reconciliations. But to Laura's family, it seemed they had finally found stability. What Laura didn't know was that Tyler Tessier was living a double life. And the secret he was hiding? It wasn't just an affair. It was an entire second existence. Another woman, another promise, another lie so calculated that when the truth finally emerged, even seasoned detectives would struggle to comprehend the depth of his deception. But first, he needed to make sure Laura never told anyone. Tyler Tessier didn't just lie. He constructed entire realities, 2 separate worlds that could never intersect. Until Laura's pregnancy forced everything into collision. Tyler Tessier lived in Damascus, Maryland, a small community about 30 miles northwest of Washington, D.C. To all outward appearances, he was Laura's devoted partner. But investigators would later discover that for years, Tessier had been engaged to another woman. A relationship that had lasted 10 years. The 2 women had no idea the other existed. When Laura became pregnant, she told her family. Her father, Mark, concerned about their on and off relationship, asked Tessier directly about his intentions. According to Mark Wallen, Tessier showed him an engagement ring and said he planned to propose to Laura. He assured Mark he would take care of her. Mark Wallen believed him. Laura believed him. But there was something Mark couldn't have known in that moment. The ring Tyler showed Laura's father? It was never meant for Laura. Within weeks, Tessier would use that exact same ring to propose to the other woman. She said yes, and they set a wedding date. The ceremony was scheduled for October 2017, just 1 month after Laura's baby was due to be born. In late August 2017, Laura began to suspect something was wrong. She discovered the existence of Tessier's fiancé. Rather than confront him immediately, Laura reached out directly to the other woman. She sent a text message. She wasn't looking for a confrontation, she wrote. She wanted to talk, woman to woman, about what was happening. When the other woman showed Tyler the message, his response was chilling. 6 days before Laura disappeared, Tessier sent a text to his fiancée. Quote, "I could literally kill her for what she's done." On September 1st, 2017, Laura's family saw her for the last time. 24 hours later, Laura would send her sister a photograph, an open field, trees in the distance, and a message that would haunt investigators for days. Because Tyler Tessier had told her they were going on an adventure. What Laura didn't realize was that she was being driven to her own grave, and she would never leave that field alive. September 2nd would be the day everything ended for Laura Wallen. But Tyler Tessier's plan was just beginning, and for the next 72 hours, he would send text messages from her phone, dispose of evidence, and prepare for the performance of his life. September 2nd, 2017, 8:30 p.m. Surveillance cameras at a Safeway grocery store in Olney captured Laura Wallen and Tyler Tessier making a purchase together. It would be the last time anyone aside from Tessier would see Laura alive. Later that evening, Laura sent a text message to her sister. Quote, "Tyler has me on an adventure in the country. Don't know why I'm here, but it's for something." She included a photograph. An open field, trees in the distance. She never explained what that something was, and she would never send another message again. Investigators believe Laura Wallen was killed the following day, September 3rd, shot in the back of the head. Her body was buried in a shallow grave on a remote farm in Damascus. On September 4th, Laura's family received text messages from her phone, but Laura wasn't the one sending them. Tyler Tessier had taken her phone and was sending messages, pretending to be her. When questioned by police, he would later admit to doing this. On that same day, late at night, Tessier sent a text to an acquaintance. He needed a ride to Baltimore, he wrote. He needed help to, quote, "clean up a mess." The acquaintance declined. September 5th, the first day of school. Laura Wallen didn't show up for work. She hadn't requested a substitute. Her students waited. Her colleagues grew concerned. And her family immediately knew something was terribly wrong. Laura's sister called police. Within hours, a missing persons investigation was underway. Detectives began interviewing everyone who knew Laura, including her boyfriend. Tyler Tessier sat across from detectives and told his story. But there was a problem. Every time he opened his mouth, a different version came out. And with each interview, the inconsistencies grew. Police knew they were dealing with a liar. What they didn't know yet was whether they were dealing with a killer. But they were about to find out. And the evidence they'd uncover would lead them to make a decision that would shock the entire community. While hundreds of volunteers searched fields and forests for Laura Wallen, detectives were watching one person more closely than anyone else. And they were about to do something unprecedented. Something that would either break their case wide open or give a potential murderer exactly what he wanted: a public stage. Laura's sister reported her missing on September 5th. Within hours, the Montgomery County Police Department launched an investigation. Laura's family, friends, students, and community members distributed flyers throughout Howard and Montgomery counties. Her face, with the word "missing" in bold red letters, appeared on telephone poles, in store windows, and across social media. On September 7th, police discovered Laura's 2011 black Ford Escape in the parking lot of an apartment complex in Columbia, directly across the highway from Wild Lake High School. The front license plate had been removed. Inside a dumpster at the complex, investigators found Laura's driver's license and iPhone. Both had been discarded there. Behind the scenes, detectives were piecing together a disturbing picture. Tyler Tessier had already been interviewed multiple times, and each time his story changed. He admitted to driving Laura's car to the apartment complex. He admitted to throwing away her license and phone. But he insisted he had no idea where Laura was. Police obtained the photograph Laura had sent to her sister on September 2nd. The open field, the trees. Tech analysts began working to determine the location, and investigators discovered something else. Tyler Tessier had been visiting a specific rural area in Damascus multiple times since Laura went missing. On September 11th, 6 days after Laura was reported missing, her family held a press conference. They offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to her safe return. Laura's parents were there, devastated, pleading for their daughter's life. And sitting beside them, holding Laura's mother's hand, was Tyler Tessier. He cried. He trembled. His voice broke. He held the hands of Laura's parents, these people who trusted him, who believed in him. He said, quote, "Laura, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what's happened. It doesn't matter what type of trouble. There is nothing we can't fix together, myself and your family. If somebody has her, please understand that you've taken away a huge person in so many people's lives." The media coverage was extensive. The public rallied. The search intensified. Everyone who watched believed they had just witnessed a boyfriend's desperate plea for his missing girlfriend. But what the public didn't know, what even Tyler Tessier's own parents didn't know as they watched him on television, was that at that exact moment, Montgomery County detectives were sitting in an operations room watching the same press conference. Not as observers, as investigators, because Tyler Tessier was already their prime suspect. Police Chief Tom Manger would later explain that allowing Tessier to attend the press conference was a calculated investigative strategy, done with the full knowledge and approval of Laura's family. Detectives wanted to see exactly what he would say, how he would perform, what lies he would tell. While Tyler Tessier sat beside Laura's mother, holding her hand, telling the cameras he didn't know where Laura was, detectives knew he was lying. They had already identified inconsistencies in his statements. They had already found the photograph location, and they were already planning to obtain a search warrant for a specific property in Damascus. 2 days after that press conference, on September 13th, the search team arrived at the farm where we began this story. The cadaver dogs had caught a scent. Their handlers could barely hold them back as they pulled toward a specific spot in the woods. Fresh tire tracks led directly to the location, and when the search team finally reached the clearing, they found exactly what Tyler Tessier had been hiding, exactly what he had driven past multiple times in the days after Laura disappeared. Checking, making sure his secret stayed buried. The press conference had been 2 days earlier. Tyler Tessier had looked into the cameras and begged for Laura's safe return. And at that very moment, her body was lying here, in this field, in this shallow grave. His time was up. The discovery of Laura Wallen's body would answer one question that had haunted her family for 9 days. But it would open another that would consume investigators for the next year. How far would Tyler Tessier go to protect his lies? September 13th, 2017. Noon. A Montgomery County police search and rescue team, accompanied by cadaver dogs, arrived at a large farm property along Price's Distillery Road in Damascus. The property owner had no connection to the case, but the photograph Laura sent to her sister matched this location. The dogs immediately began pulling their handlers toward a specific area, following tire tracks, fresh tracks that led into a wooded section of the property. The team moved quickly, and then, in a small clearing, they stopped. Disturbed earth, a shallow depression, and protruding from the soil, clothing. They had found Laura Wallen. The scene was photographed. Evidence was collected. And less than 6 hours later, at 5:30 that evening, Tyler Tessier was arrested at his home in Damascus. He was charged with first-degree murder, altering physical evidence, and making false statements to police. The autopsy would later confirm what investigators suspected. Laura had been shot in the back of the head. A single gunshot wound. Execution style. Under Maryland law, Tessier could not be charged for the death of Laura's unborn child. At 13 weeks gestation, the fetus was not considered viable independent of the mother. He received only one murder charge. At his bond hearing the following day, the judge looked directly at Tessier and said, quote, "I do think that you are a danger to the community." He was denied bail and held without bond until trial. Laura's father, Mark Wallen, spoke outside the courthouse. His voice was steady, but his words cut like a blade. Quote, "He is a monster. He's a liar. And it was absolutely the hardest thing my wife could do, to sit next to him at that press conference and hold his hand."
He is a monster, and he is a liar.
Tyler Tessier would spend the next 11 months behind bars. Awaiting trial, prosecutors built their case. The evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, text messages, his own admissions to police about disposing of evidence. The trial date was set for September 6, 2018. Exactly 1 year and 1 day after Laura's body was found. Jury selection proceeded smoothly. 12 citizens were chosen. Both sides were ready. Opening statements were scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Laura's family prepared themselves for 3 weeks of testimony, evidence, and trauma. They would finally get to hear the full truth. Finally get justice. But Tyler Tessier had one final move to make. One last act of control. And when the sun rose on September 6, 2018, he would ensure that Laura's family never heard him answer for what he'd done. Because he knew what was coming. He'd seen the evidence. He'd read the witness statements. He knew he'd be found guilty. And he wasn't going to let that happen. Before we reach that final morning, there's one more moment that needs to be understood. Because even in death, Laura Wallen continued to touch lives. And her family would fight to ensure her legacy meant something more than just another victim of violence. On September 30, 2017, Laura Wallen and her unborn son Reed were laid to rest at the Lutheran Church of St. Andrew in Silver Spring, Maryland. 3 overflow areas were required to accommodate the hundreds of people who came to pay their respects. Laura's father told mourners that Laura considered herself a work in progress, but she could find the amazing potential in anyone and everyone. It was the hallmark of her teaching career. Quote, "Laura, in her own way, has changed many lives for the better." For nearly a year, Tyler Tessier sat in a Montgomery County jail cell. His trial was scheduled for September 6, 2018. Prosecutors spent months building their case. They had surveillance footage placing him and Laura together the night she disappeared. They had his text messages, including the threat to kill her. They had his conflicting statements to police. They had his admission to disposing of evidence. Jury selection took place over 2 days. 12 citizens were chosen. Opening statements were scheduled for 9:30 a.m. on September 6. The trial was expected to last 3 weeks. Laura's family prepared themselves for the ordeal ahead. To see crime scene photographs. To hear how their daughter died. To sit in the same room as the man who killed her. September 6, 2018. 4 a.m. Tyler Tessier woke in his cell at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility in Clarksburg. This was routine. On trial days, inmates wake early to prepare for transport to court. At 4:15, he showered. Alone. In a single cell. At 4:36, a guard checked on him. He was seen getting dressed. At 4:45, breakfast was delivered to his cell. He refused it. At 4:55 a.m., during the next routine check, a guard looked into Tyler Tessier's cell and found him hanging from a bedsheet. Efforts were made to revive him. At 5:32 a.m., he was pronounced dead. 4 hours later, at 9:30 a.m., Circuit Judge Michael Mason entered the courtroom. Prosecutors were ready. The defense was ready. Jurors sat waiting. Laura's family sat in the front row, steeling themselves. Judge Mason had instructed the jury not to watch or read local news. They had no idea what had happened that morning. The judge said, quote, "I expect what I'm about to tell you will come as a shock. There's no easy way to tell you this. But the defendant was found dead in his cell at 5 o'clock this morning. Apparently a suicide. So there will be no trial." Some jurors gasped. Others sat in stunned silence. Laura's family, who had waited nearly a year for this day, watched as the courtroom emptied. No trial, no testimony, no verdict, no accountability. In an unprecedented move, Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy made a decision. If the public couldn't hear the evidence in a courtroom, they would hear it at a press conference. That afternoon, with Laura's family standing beside him, he presented the case they had prepared for trial. He showed the text messages, the threats, the lies. He revealed that Tessier had maintained dual relationships with two women for years. He explained that Laura had reached out to the other woman just days before she was killed, wanting to tell her about the pregnancy. McCarthy said, quote, "We were robbed this morning of the opportunity to allow the public to know the true nature and details of this crime. To Tyler Tessier, lying was like breathing. He lied about everything." McCarthy called Tessier a psychopath. He revealed that during one police interview, Tessier had admitted to shooting Laura, though that confession would have been excluded at trial for legal reasons. 5 suicide notes were found in Tessier's cell, stacked on top of his bunk bed. The identities of the recipients and the contents of the letters have never been made public. But McCarthy confirmed one critical detail. None of the letters acknowledged killing Laura Wallen. Even in death, Tyler Tessier offered no confession, no apology, no truth. Laura's brother-in-law, John Conti, addressed the cameras with words meant for a man who could no longer hear them. Quote, "He stood our family up for the last time today." In the aftermath, Laura's family pushed for a change to Maryland law. They called it Laura and Reed's Law. It would allow prosecutors to charge suspects with murder for the death of an unborn child, regardless of the age of the fetus. They wanted to ensure that what happened to Reed would not be forgotten. Laura Wallen's classroom at Wild Lake High School stands as a reminder of the life cut short. A teacher who believed in potential. A woman who led with compassion. A mother who never got to meet her son. She was 31 years old.
Good evening, everyone. A family is desperately searching for a Fargo woman who is 8 months pregnant. Today, choppers and search dogs were used to try and find Savannah LaFontaine Graywind.
WDAY 6 reporter Sarah Rudlang tells us how she's been missing for more than 48 hours now and why family believes she may be in danger.
As time slips by, worry grows deep for Savannah LaFontaine Graywind's loved ones.
She's a great woman, man.
Ashton Matheny, her boyfriend of 7 years, spending every minute he can spreading the word about her disappearance.
It's very unlike her to just up and disappear like that without telling anything, and I don't think that she would do that.
Savannah is Native American and 8 months pregnant with the couple's first child.
August 27, 2017. A Sunday morning. 2 kayakers are about to make a discovery that will expose one of America's darkest secrets. For 8 days, this city has been consumed by a mystery. A young woman, 8 months pregnant, walked upstairs to help her neighbor with a simple favor. She never came back. But here's what nobody knew yet. The neighbor's secret wasn't just one lie. It was 3. A fake pregnancy, a stolen baby, and a body wrapped in plastic, hidden in plain sight for over a week. This isn't just a story about one crime. It's about what investigators found when they started asking the right questions. About the moment police searched an apartment twice and missed what was hiding in the bedroom both times. About how a community rallied to find answers when the system failed. And about the twist that would come in the courtroom when the person who committed murder would walk away without a murder conviction. I'm going to show you how a single act of violence exposed a crisis that's been happening for generations. How one woman's name became federal law, and why thousands of families are still searching for answers. But first, you need to know who Savannah LaFontaine Graywind really was. Because this case, it almost didn't get investigated at all. Welcome to True Crime Mind Studio. Tonight we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it. But before I show you what police found in that apartment, before I reveal the 3 lies that nearly let 2 killers escape, you need to understand why this case almost never got investigated at all. And that starts with knowing who Savannah really was. Fargo, North Dakota. Population around 120,000. A city that straddles the border with Minnesota. Known for cold winters, friendly people, and a sense of safety. The kind of place where neighbors know each other, where people trust each other. Savannah LaFontaine Greywind was 22 years old in the summer of 2017. She was a member of the Spirit Lake Nation, one of the Dakota tribes of North Dakota. By all accounts, she was everything you'd hope to find in a young person. Kind, generous, always willing to help. Her family was tight-knit. She lived with her parents, Joe and Norberta, in a modest apartment building on the north side of Fargo, and she was 8 months pregnant. She and her boyfriend, Ashton Matheny, were preparing to welcome their first child, a little girl they'd already named, Hazley Jo. In those final weeks of pregnancy, Savannah was doing what expectant mothers do, preparing, nesting, dreaming about the future. She was excited, nervous, ready to become a mom. On the 3rd floor of that same apartment building lived a couple, Brooke Cruz, 38, and her boyfriend William Hone, 32. Neighbors passing in the hallway. But beneath the surface, their lives were chaotic, troubled, and about to intersect with Savannah's in the most horrific way imaginable. Brooke Cruz had 7 children from previous relationships. She had no contact with any of them. William Hone had 2 children from prior relationships, also estranged. Their relationship was volatile. Neighbors reported hearing fights through the walls, shouting, doors slamming, the sounds of a couple in crisis. And there was something else, something that would become crucial to understanding what happened next. Brooke Cruz was telling people she was pregnant. She'd been saying it for months, showing off maternity clothes, talking about due dates. There was just one problem. She wasn't pregnant. In the psychological literature, there's a term for what Brooke Cruz was experiencing. It's called pseudocyesis, false pregnancy, or in more extreme cases, it's part of a delusional disorder. Women experiencing this condition genuinely believe they're pregnant. They may even exhibit physical symptoms. But Cruz's case appears to have been something more calculated, more sinister. She was using the lie to hold onto her relationship with William Hone, to give him a reason to stay. And as her supposed due date approached, as questions mounted, as the lie became impossible to maintain, Brooke Cruz made a decision that would destroy multiple lives. She decided to get a baby, any way she could, and she knew exactly where to find one, just 1 floor below. What I'm about to tell you happened in less than 3 hours. 3 hours that would end one life, begin another, and set in motion a cover-up so brazen that even when police searched the apartment, not once but twice, they'd miss the most critical piece of evidence. But let me start at the beginning of that Saturday. Saturday, August 19, 2017. It's late afternoon in Fargo. The temperature is warm. Savannah LaFontaine Greywind is at home with her family. Just a typical Saturday, or so it seems. Around 1 p.m., there's a knock on the LaFontaine Greywind's apartment door. It's Brooke Cruz from upstairs. She has a request. She says she's working on a sewing project, making a dress, and she needs someone to model it. Would Savannah help? She'll pay $20. It's such an ordinary request, the kind of favor neighbors do for each other. And Savannah, characteristically kind and helpful, agrees. At 1:24 p.m., Savannah texts her mother and her boyfriend. She tells them she's going upstairs to help the neighbor with a dress. It's the last communication anyone will receive from Savannah LaFontaine Greywind. What happened next in Brooke Cruz's 3rd-floor apartment wasn't discovered until much later. But court testimony and Cruz's own confession would eventually fill in the horrifying details. Savannah goes upstairs, trusting, unsuspecting. Within minutes, Brooke Cruz attacks her. According to Cruz's later testimony, she pushed Savannah during a confrontation, causing her to fall and hit her head on the bathroom sink. Savannah loses consciousness, and then Brooke Cruz does the unthinkable. Using a box cutter, a simple utility knife, she performs a crude cesarean section on the unconscious woman. She cuts into Savannah's abdomen and removes the baby. The apartment below later told investigators they heard banging sounds that afternoon. Bang, 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 coming from the bathtub overhead. The sounds lasted about 20 minutes. Then they heard the shower turn on. They didn't think much of it. The couple upstairs fought a lot. But those sounds, those were Savannah LaFontaine Greywind fighting for her life. William Hone came home later that afternoon. And this is where accounts diverge, and the question of his involvement becomes crucial. According to court testimony, Cruz showed him the newborn baby, told him, "This is our baby. This is our family." Hone would later claim he believed Cruz had given birth. But prosecutors presented evidence that suggested otherwise. Evidence that Savannah was still alive when Hone arrived home. Evidence that Hone participated in what happened next. According to testimony, William Hone took a rope and strangled Savannah LaFontaine Greywind, ensuring she wouldn't survive. Then he and Cruz stuffed her body into a bathroom closet. Downstairs, in the LaFontaine Greywind apartment, time is passing. It's getting later in the afternoon. Savannah hasn't come back. Her brother needs a ride to work, something Savannah had agreed to do. He goes upstairs to Cruz's apartment and knocks. No answer. Savannah's father, Joe Greywind, tries next. This time Cruz answers the door. She tells him they're still working on the dress. Not finished yet. But by 4:30 p.m., Savannah's mother, Norberta, knows something is wrong. Her daughter's purse is still in the apartment. Her car is outside. The pizza she'd ordered sits untouched. Norberta does what any mother would do. She calls the police. Fargo police arrive at 5 p.m. They speak with Brooke Cruz, who tells them Savannah left around 2:45 p.m. She seems calm, cooperative. She doesn't mention the newborn baby hidden in her bedroom. And here's what's remarkable and disturbing. Police would search Cruz's apartment not once, but twice in the following days. Both times they missed the baby. According to later reports, the infant was apparently hidden under bed covers during those searches. A newborn baby, just feet away from investigating officers, and somehow remained undetected. For the next 8 days, Fargo becomes consumed with the search for Savannah LaFontaine Greywind. Her family is frantic. They organize searches. They distribute flyers. They speak to media. They do everything they can. And the community responds. Hundreds of volunteers join the search. Native American advocacy groups arrive from across the region. There are vigils, prayers, a growing sense that something terrible has happened. And all the while, Brooke Cruz and William Hone are living upstairs, living with the baby they stole, living with the knowledge of what they've done, and living with Savannah's body hidden in their apartment. On the night of August 20th, just one day after Savannah disappeared, neighbors report seeing Cruz and Hone carrying something large out of the apartment building, something wrapped in plastic, something heavy. It was a hollowed-out dresser. Inside was Savannah LaFontaine Greywind's body. But here's what nobody knew yet. As volunteers searched the riverbanks and police followed dead-end leads, as Savannah's family begged for answers, the baby was still alive, still breathing, still hidden in that apartment, and police were about to walk right past her. Again. By day 5, investigators had a problem. They knew Brooke Cruz was lying. They knew something happened in that apartment. But knowing and proving are two very different things. And without probable cause for a search warrant, that baby and the truth would stay hidden. So they did something clever. They started watching social media. And that's when Cruz made her first mistake. August 24, 2017. 5 days into the investigation, Fargo Police Chief David Todd is facing mounting pressure. Pregnant woman has vanished. The family is adamant that the upstairs neighbors are involved. And Todd's detectives are working around the clock. Cruz had been posting for months about being pregnant, pictures of maternity clothes, comments about due dates. But medical records told a different story. She hadn't been to a doctor, no prenatal care, no confirmation of pregnancy. And then suddenly, She's posting photos of a newborn baby. But investigators had a problem. They needed a search warrant. And to get a search warrant, they needed probable cause. They needed evidence. And then they got a break. Neighbors reported seeing something strange on the night of August 20th, just one day after Savannah disappeared. Cruz and Hone, carrying something large and heavy out of the apartment building. Something wrapped in plastic. At night, when they thought no one was watching. It was a dresser. But here's what made investigators suspicious. Witnesses said it looked hollow. Light enough for two people to carry, but large enough to hide something inside. On August 24th, investigators obtained a search warrant. Not just for evidence of foul play, but for the baby they suspected was in the apartment. That afternoon, they executed the warrant. What happened next would become one of the most shocking moments in Fargo law enforcement history. Officers knock on Brooke Cruz's door. She answers. Calm. Almost too calm. They show her the warrant. "We need to come in," they tell her. And Cruz steps aside. Officers begin their search. Living room, nothing unusual. Kitchen, nothing. Bathroom, clean. Almost too clean for someone who supposedly just gave birth 5 days ago. And then they enter the bedroom. There, in the bedroom, officers find a newborn infant. A baby girl. Healthy. Alert. Wrapped in blankets. But something isn't right. An EMT examines Brooke Cruz on scene. And here's the discovery that changes everything. Cruz shows no signs of having recently given birth. No physical indicators. No medical evidence. Nothing. And that's when investigators know. This baby was never Brooke Cruz's. This baby was stolen. Brooke Cruz is arrested on the spot. But investigators now face an urgent question. If this is Savannah's baby, where is Savannah? Within hours, William Hone is picked up at his workplace. He's brought in for questioning. And this is where the investigation takes its first major twist. Because what Hone tells investigators doesn't match what Cruz is saying. Cruz claims Savannah came to her apartment voluntarily. That she taught Savannah how to induce labor. That Savannah gave her the baby as a gift. Hone's story? Completely different. He claims he came home from work, found Cruz with a baby, and believed she'd actually given birth. He says he had no idea anything was wrong. Two suspects, two completely different stories, both obviously lying. But about what exactly? Investigators fast-track DNA testing on the baby. And on August 25th, they get confirmation. The baby is Savannah LaFontaine Graywind's biological daughter, which means this is no longer just a missing person case. This is a kidnapping, possibly a murder. August 25th. Police Chief David Todd calls a press conference, and he makes a statement that sends chills through the community. "We think we have the right people," Todd says. But then he adds something unusual. He asks the public to search everywhere. Garages, dumpsters, abandoned buildings, bodies of water. He's telling the community, without saying it directly, we're looking for a body.
Ready? This is Chief David Todd with the Fargo Police Department making a statement regarding the Savannah Graywind missing persons case. The Fargo Police Department has put all of its resources towards solving this case from the beginning. We've had 35 detectives, 4 sergeants, 2 lieutenants, and a deputy chief overseeing this investigation. We've also asked for assistance from outside agencies and used 3 aircraft, watercraft, and canines in trying to find Savannah Graywind. Yesterday, we were able to develop some information that led to a search warrant, which was conducted today. When we conducted the search warrant at the suspect residence, we discovered an infant that appears to be a newborn infant. At this point in time, we're not able to confirm if that newborn infant is Savannah Graywind's child or not, and at this time, we do not have information that tells us where Savannah Graywind is. We have 2 people detained right now for questioning, and the investigation is proceeding. We ask people to be patient with us because this is at a critical juncture of the investigation, and we want to make sure we're as thorough as possible so that we can get the correct answers to all the questions that people have. Thank you for your patience, and stay tuned to our Facebook page as we put out further information. Thank you.
For the next 2 days, the search intensifies. Volunteers comb the riverbanks. Dive teams search the water. K-9 units track scents. Everyone knows time is running out. August 27, 2017. Sunday morning. The sun is just coming up over the Red River, about 6 miles north of Fargo. 2 kayakers are out on the water. It's quiet, beautiful, the kind of North Dakota morning that makes you grateful to be alive. And then they see it. Something in the water. Something that shouldn't be there. At first, they think it's debris. Trash. Maybe something that fell off a boat. But as they get closer, they realize what they're looking at. It's a body, wrapped in plastic, floating in the river. The Savannah LaFontaine Greywind. Within hours, the scene is swarming with investigators. The Cass County coroner is called. The FBI joins the investigation, and the grim task of processing the scene begins. The preliminary findings are devastating. Savannah died from asphyxiation. She was strangled. But the evidence also confirms what investigators suspected. She'd been subjected to a crude cesarean section while still alive. The timeline suggests she survived the attack initially, that she was alive when Brooke Cruz cut into her abdomen, that she was still breathing when William Hone came home, and that's when everything changed. Detectives have to make the call no one wants to make. They drive to the LaFontaine Greywind home. They knock on the door. For Savannah's family, the discovery brings heartbreak and relief in equal measure. They knew. They'd known from the beginning something terrible had happened. Now they had confirmation. But in the midst of tragedy, there's something else. Something that feels impossible. Baby Hazley Joe is alive. Healthy. Safe. In September 2017, Ashton Matheny, Savannah's boyfriend and Hazley Joe's father, is granted custody of his daughter. The baby that was stolen from her mother's womb would be raised by her biological father with the support of her grandparents and extended family. But now investigators face a critical question. The one that will define the entire legal case. Who actually killed Savannah LaFontaine Greywind? Was it Brooke Cruz acting alone? Or did William Hone help? And if he helped, was it before or after Savannah died? But here's what's about to make this case even more disturbing. When Brooke Cruz finally tells the truth about what happened in that apartment, when she describes in graphic detail who did what, a jury is going to decide that's not enough. Because sometimes in America, even when you know who the killer is, even when they confess, even when there's testimony about a rope and a woman struggling to breathe, justice still finds a way to fail. For months after Savannah's murder, everyone thought they knew how this would play out. 2 defendants, 2 trials, 2 murder convictions, life in prison for both. Clean, simple, justice. But this case was about to prove that justice is never simple. And what happened in that Fargo courtroom would leave a family devastated and a community asking, how is this possible? December 11, 2017. For months after Savannah's murder, the Cass County Courthouse in Fargo is packed. Media from across the region, curious onlookers, and in the back, sitting quietly, Norberta and Joe Greywind. Everyone expects this to be a preliminary hearing. Another procedural step on the long road to trial. But Brooke Cruz's defense attorney has called this hearing for a reason, and what's about to happen will change everything. Brooke Cruz is led into the courtroom wearing an orange jail uniform, handcuffs, leg chains. She sits down and the hearing begins. Judge Frank Rochek looks at Cruz. How do you plead to the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. The courtroom erupts. This wasn't expected. Cruz wasn't supposed to plead guilty today. She was supposed to fight this. Her attorney had been preparing for trial. But now, prosecutor Leah Vist stands up. And for the first time publicly, she reveals exactly what happened in that apartment. The defendant, Vist says, lured Savannah LaFontaine Greywind, who was 8 months pregnant, up to her apartment as part of a conspiracy to murder Savannah and steal her unborn baby. Savannah died as a result of homicidal violence that had been inflicted on her by the defendant and her co-defendant. Her co-defendant. That means both of them, Cruz and Hone, both responsible for Savannah's death. As the charges are read, Cruz begins to cry. She's choking up, biting her lip, looking down, and when asked if she agrees to the facts as stated by the prosecutor, she mouths, barely audible, yes. When the hearing ends, just over 5 minutes after it began, Norberta LaFontaine Greywind does something she hasn't done in months. She smiles. She hugs family members, supporters. For the first time since August, there's a sense of relief, of closure. One person has admitted guilt, has taken responsibility. On February 2, 2018, Brooke Cruz returns to court for sentencing. Judge Rochek has a decision to make. Does he show mercy? Consider her mental state? Her troubled past? He does not. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Brooke Cruz will die behind bars. Before sentencing, Cruz addresses the court. She apologizes to Savannah's family. She cries. She says she's sorry. But Savannah's family sits silently. No forgiveness. No acknowledgement. Just quiet, painful grief. One down. One to go.
I am guilty, and I deserve every year I get. I just wanted them to know that I am sorry for what I did.
Now comes William Hone's case, and this is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. March 20th, 2018. Hone's trial begins. He's charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and providing false information to investigators. But he's pleading not guilty to all charges. His defense strategy is simple. He claims he didn't know what Cruz had done until after the fact. That he came home from work, found Cruz with a baby, and believed she'd actually given birth. That he's not a murderer. The prosecution, meanwhile, has a star witness. Someone who was there. Someone who knows exactly what happened. Brooke Cruz herself. Cruz takes the stand and testifies against her former boyfriend. And her testimony is explosive. She describes in graphic detail what happened on August 19th. How she lured Savannah upstairs. How she attacked her in the bathroom. How she performed the cesarean section with a box cutter while Savannah drifted in and out of consciousness from blood loss. And then she describes what happened when William Hone came home. According to Cruz, she showed him the baby. Told him, "This is our baby. This is our family." And then, according to Cruz's testimony, William Hone looked at Savannah, still alive, barely conscious, bleeding, and made a decision. He grabbed a rope, and he strangled her. The courtroom is silent, stunned. This is the moment prosecutors have been building toward. Direct testimony that William Hone murdered Savannah LaFontaine Greywind. But there's a problem. Brooke Cruz is a convicted murderer, testifying in exchange for nothing. She has every reason to minimize her own involvement and blame Hone for everything. She's not a credible witness, and Hone's defense attorney knows it. The defense argues that Cruz is lying, that she's the one who killed Savannah, and now she's trying to drag Hone down with her. They point out inconsistencies in her story. They highlight her mental health issues. They argue that there's no physical evidence tying Hone to the actual murder. The jury deliberates, and on September 27, 2018, they reach a verdict. Guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Guilty of providing false information to police. But on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, not guilty. The jury acquits William Hone of conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom erupts. Savannah's family is devastated. How could this happen? Brooke Cruz testified that Hone strangled Savannah. The prosecution presented evidence that he helped dispose of the body. And yet, not guilty of murder. So what happened? How did the jury reach this verdict? According to legal experts who observed the trial, the jury had reasonable doubt. They didn't fully believe Brooke Cruz's testimony about the strangulation. They thought she might be lying to reduce her own culpability. And without physical evidence directly tying Hone to Savannah's death, they couldn't convict him of murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Here's the legal reality. Hone was still convicted of helping kidnap the baby and lying to police about it. Those are serious crimes. But the jury decided that the prosecution hadn't proven he intended to kill Savannah or that he directly participated in her murder. It's a technicality, a legal distinction, but it matters. In October 2018, William Hone is sentenced. The prosecution asks for the maximum, life in prison. Savannah's family begs the judge to ensure Hone never walks free. I don't think this man should ever walk free, Savannah's mother, Norberta, tells the court.
My life has been forever changed. As for Savannah's daughter, this man tried to take her and raise her as his own. He said the days he spent with my granddaughter were the happiest days of his life. How sick is that?
Judge Tom Olson sentences Hone to 20 years in prison. 20 years. Not life. Not forever. 20 years. Hone was 32 when arrested in 2017. With 20 years, if he serves his full sentence, he'll be released in 2038. He'll be 52 years old. In 2019, Hone was transferred out of North Dakota to an Oregon prison for protective management purposes. He's currently incarcerated there, serving his sentence. For Savannah's family, the verdict feels like a betrayal, a failure of justice. Brooke Cruz will die in prison, as she should. But William Hone, who according to testimony strangled Savannah, who helped hide her body, who lied to police while they searched desperately for her, will eventually walk free. This is the uncomfortable reality of the American justice system. Sometimes, even when we think we know what happened, proving it beyond a reasonable doubt is impossible. Sometimes, even when justice is partially served, it feels incomplete. But if you think this story ends with an imperfect verdict and a family's grief, you're wrong. Because what happened next, what Savannah's family did next, would change everything. They turned their tragedy into a movement, their loss into legislation, their grief into change that would affect thousands of families across America. But before I show you how Savannah's name ended up on a federal law signed by the president, before I reveal why this case became a turning point in American history, you need to understand the crisis that's been hiding in plain sight. A crisis so vast, so systemic that Savannah's case, as horrific as it was, is just one story among thousands. And here's the most disturbing part. Most of America has no idea it's even happening. I'm about to show you numbers that will shock you. Statistics that reveal one of America's darkest ongoing failures. But more than that, I'm going to show you why Savannah's case was different and why that difference matters. Because the real question isn't just what happened to Savannah LaFontaine Greywind? The real question is, how many other Savannahs are out there right now, missing, murdered, and forgotten? Here are some numbers you need to know. In 2017, the year Savannah was murdered, over 5,600 Native American women and girls were reported missing. Murder rates against Indigenous women are 10 times the national average. 84% of Native women experience violence in their lifetimes. 56% experience sexual violence. And here's the most disturbing statistic of all. 97% of these women are victimized by non-Native perpetrators. This is what's known as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Crisis, MILG for short. It's not new. It's been happening for generations. But it's been largely invisible, ignored, dismissed. Part of the problem is jurisdictional complexity. When crimes occur on tribal lands or involve Native victims, questions arise about who has the authority to investigate. Is it tribal police, local police, state police, federal authorities? Often, these agencies don't communicate effectively. Cases fall through the cracks. Families are left without answers. But Savannah's case was different. It happened in Fargo, off tribal land. Local police had clear jurisdiction. The community rallied. Media paid attention. And prosecutors aggressively pursued justice. Journalist Mona Gable, who wrote a book about Savannah's case, said that Savannah's case became a flashpoint because of the community response. People were just horrified, Gable said in interviews. They weren't going to accept what had happened to her. They wanted more done. And that's exactly what happened. Savannah's murder became a catalyst for federal legislation. In October 2017, just 2 months after Savannah's death, Senator Heidi Heitkamp introduced legislation called Savannah's Act. Named in honor of Savannah LaFontaine Greywind, the bill aimed to improve data collection on missing and murdered Native Americans, clarify responsibilities of tribal, federal, state, and local law enforcement, increase coordination among different law enforcement agencies, empower tribal governments with resources and information, and require the Department of Justice to develop protocols for responding to these cases. The bill passed the Senate unanimously in December 2018, but it stalled in the House. Senator Heitkamp lost her re-election, and the legislation languished. But advocates didn't give up. Senators Lisa Murkowski and Catherine Cortez Masto reintroduced the bill in 2019. Representatives Deb Haaland and Norma Torres championed it in the House. On October 10, 2020, over 3 years after Savannah's murder, President Donald Trump signed Savannah's Act into law. It was a bipartisan achievement, a rare moment of unity in an increasingly divided political landscape. That same day, Trump also signed the Not Invisible Act, companion legislation that created an advisory committee to address violent crime against Native Americans more broadly. Today, Savannah's Act requires the Department of Justice to work with tribal governments to improve data collection and law enforcement response. It requires U.S. attorneys in districts with tribal land to develop guidelines for responding to missing and murdered Indigenous persons cases. It mandates training for law enforcement on how to properly record tribal enrollment information in federal databases. Is it perfect? No. Implementation has been slow. There are still gaps. Still families waiting for answers. Still cases going uninvestigated. But it's a start. And it happened because Savannah LaFontaine Greywind's family refused to let her death be in vain. Every August, on the anniversary of Savannah's death, her family and community hold a memorial walk in Moorhead, Minnesota. They wear red, the color that represents missing and murdered Indigenous women. They carry signs. They chant her name. They demand justice not just for Savannah, but for the thousands of Indigenous women still missing. Hazley Joe is 7 years old now. She's in school. She's being raised by her father Ashton with the love and support of her grandparents, the Greywind family. She'll grow up knowing who her mother was, knowing what happened, knowing that her mother's name changed history. Norberta and Joe Greywind have become advocates. They speak at events. They push for continued implementation of Savannah's Act. They refuse to let people forget. Savannah LaFontaine Greywind was 22 years old. She was a daughter, a girlfriend, an expectant mother, a member of the Spirit Lake Nation. She was kind. She was trusting. She was betrayed in the most horrific way imaginable. But she's also more than a victim. She's a catalyst, a symbol, a reminder that Indigenous women's lives matter, that their disappearances and deaths must be investigated with the same urgency, the same resources, the same commitment that would be given to anyone else. Savannah's Act is law, but the work isn't done. There are still thousands of missing Indigenous women, thousands of families waiting for answers, thousands of cases that need investigation. Savannah LaFontaine Greywind's legacy is this: her death must not be forgotten, and the deaths and disappearances of Indigenous women everywhere must finally be seen, acknowledged, and addressed. In memory of Savannah LaFontaine Greywind, 1995 to 2017, and all missing and murdered Indigenous women. Brooke Cruz is serving life without parole at North Dakota State Penitentiary. William Hone is serving 20 years in Oregon, eligible for release in 2038. Hazley Joe is thriving with her father and family. For more information about missing and murdered Indigenous women, visit the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center at niwrc.org, or learn about Savannah's Act implementation at justice.gov/tribal/MIP.
This is the Channel 2 News Late Edition.
Good evening, everyone. The massive search for missing barista Samantha Koenig is over, but it's not the news family and friends were hoping for. Anchorage police announced today they found a body they believe to be Samantha Koenig's in Matanuska Lake out in the valley.
February 1st, 2012, 8 p.m. A coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska. An 18-year-old barista looks up from her work. A man approaches the window. He orders an Americano. She smiles, makes his drink, hands it to him. Then something changes. In the surveillance footage, you can see it. Her body language shifts. The smile disappears. Within 60 seconds, they're both gone. Within 18 hours, she'll be dead. But here's what nobody knew that night. The man at the window wasn't just a kidnapper. He wasn't just a murderer. He was something much worse. This is the story of the girl who became a serial killer's final mistake. And when I say serial killer, I don't mean someone who killed 2 or 3 people. I mean someone investigators believe murdered 11 people across America over more than a decade. Someone who buried weapons in the ground years before he'd used them. Someone who traveled thousands of miles to select victims he'd never met. They've only identified 3 of those 11 victims. But before I show you the surveillance footage that captured evil in real time, before I reveal how a father's desperate attempt to save his daughter accidentally funded a killer's escape, before I tell you about what they found in his jail cell after he died, you need to understand something. This case almost never got solved, because the man who took that girl made almost no mistakes for over a decade. He was careful, calculated, meticulous, but on that February night he made 3 critical errors. And one of those errors was captured on camera. I'm about to show you how one abduction exposed a killer who studied Ted Bundy like a textbook, who called other serial killers wimps for getting caught, who told FBI agents he would have kept killing forever if he hadn't made one stupid mistake. This is the story of Samantha Koenig, the 18-year-old who fought back, who tried to run, who gave investigators the clues they needed to uncover one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history. But there's a twist in this case that nobody saw coming. Not the FBI, not the prosecutors, not even the victim's family. A twist that means 8 families still don't know their loved ones are dead. Welcome to True Crime Mind Studio. Tonight we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it. But before I show you what that surveillance camera captured, before I reveal the 3 critical mistakes that ended his killing spree, you need to know who Samantha Koenig really was. Because what she did in her final hours wasn't just brave. It was the reason investigators eventually caught him. And the reason they discovered he'd been killing for over a decade. Anchorage, Alaska. Population about 300,000. It's the largest city in Alaska, but it still has that small-town feel where people know their neighbors and trust the community. Winter nights are long and cold, but Alaskans are tough. They take care of each other. Samantha Tesla Koenig was born on August 30th, 1993. She was 18 years old in the winter of 2012, young, hardworking, full of life. She attended West High School and Avail High School in Anchorage. She worked multiple jobs, balancing school and work with the kind of determination that impressed everyone who knew her. Her father, James Koenig, had an extraordinarily close bond with Samantha. From the moment she was born, they were inseparable. Hunting trips, camping adventures, just spending time together, they were like 2 peas in a pod. Samantha was her father's companion, his pride and joy. She also had a close relationship with her sister, Kaylee Christensen, and a boyfriend named Dwayne Tortolani too. They'd been together for 9 months. Dwayne would pick her up after her late shifts at the coffee stand. It was routine. It was safe. Or so they thought. In February 2012, Samantha was working at a small drive-through coffee stand called Common Grounds Espresso on Tudor Road. It was a simple job: serve coffee, chat with regulars, close up at 8 p.m. The kind of job thousands of young people work while figuring out their future. Samantha's favorite color was lime green. She was described by friends as good-hearted, bright, someone who could light up a room. She had dreams, plans, a whole life ahead of her. But on the night of February 1st, 2012, all of that would end. Because someone had been watching her. Someone had been planning. Someone who selected that specific coffee stand for a very specific reason. And here's what makes this even more chilling. The man who was watching Samantha? He'd been practicing for this moment for over a decade. He'd already killed multiple people. He'd perfected his technique. He'd learned from other serial killers' mistakes. And on February 1st, he was finally ready to execute what he thought was the perfect crime. Except he was about to make 3 mistakes. Mistakes that would unravel everything. Israel Keyes was 34 years old in February 2012. To anyone who knew him, he seemed completely normal. He ran a small construction business in Anchorage called Keyes Construction. He had a girlfriend and a young daughter who lived with him in a modest house. He was quiet, polite, hardworking. The kind of guy you'd hire to fix your roof and never think about again. But Israel Keyes had a secret. He'd been living a double life for over a decade. And nobody, not his girlfriend, not his employees, not his neighbors, had any idea what he really was. Keyes wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who had turned murder into a twisted science. He didn't stalk specific victims. He didn't have a type. He selected targets completely at random, people who happened to cross his path at the wrong time in the wrong place. But the randomness was calculated. Keyes planned his crimes with terrifying precision. He would travel hundreds or thousands of miles from his home in Alaska. He would bury kill caches, plastic containers filled with weapons, zip ties, duct tape, in remote locations years before he'd return to use them. He financed these trips by working construction and robbing banks. He studied other serial killers. He knew every detail of Ted Bundy's crimes, Robert Hanson's methods, the BTK killer's mistakes. He told investigators he admired killers that haven't been caught. He called Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, a wimp for apologizing in court. He's enjoyed what he did. He told FBI agents that killing gave him a thrill nothing else could match. He had no remorse, no conscience, no empathy, and he would have continued indefinitely if he hadn't made 3 critical mistakes on the night of February 1st, 2012. The first mistake, he chose a victim too close to home. The second mistake, there were surveillance cameras. The third mistake, he got greedy. And that greed would lead to one of the most bizarre and disturbing ransom schemes in FBI history. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to see what happened at that coffee stand. Because what the surveillance camera captured that night wasn't just an abduction. It was a master criminal making his first fatal mistake. And he didn't even know it. The timestamp reads 7:55 p.m. The camera angle is fixed. And for the next 67 minutes, you're going to watch a serial killer execute what he thinks is the perfect crime. Except there's one problem. Something he doesn't realize until it's too late. Something that will lead investigators directly to his door. But we'll get to that. First, let me show you what happened in those 67 minutes. What I'm about to describe happened in less than 1 hour. 1 hour captured on surveillance footage that would become some of the most chilling evidence the FBI has ever analyzed. But here's what makes this footage so disturbing. You can see the exact moment Samantha realizes she's in danger. You can see her body language change. You can watch evil unfold in real time. Israel Keyes had been watching Samantha for weeks. He'd driven by common grounds multiple times, studying the location. He knew the coffee stand closed at 8 p.m. He knew a young woman worked there alone during closing. He knew her boyfriend would often pick her up after her shift. He'd seen this pattern repeat night after night. Keyes had considered other coffee stands in Anchorage, but he chose common grounds for specific reasons. Its location on a busy road gave him an escape route, and it stayed open later than others, meaning fewer potential witnesses when he made his move. On the evening of February 1st, 2012, Keyes began his final preparations. He removed the toolboxes from his white pickup truck. He took off the license plates. He parked the truck across Tudor Road from the coffee stand, in the lot between an IHOP restaurant and a Dairy Queen. Then he walked across the street. At approximately 7:55 p.m., Israel Keys approached the Common Grounds espresso window. Samantha was working alone, finishing up her shift. She was expecting her boyfriend Dwayne to arrive soon to pick her up. Keys ordered an Americano. Samantha made the drink, just like she'd made hundreds of others that day. She handed it to him through the window, and that's when surveillance footage captures the moment everything changed. You can see Samantha's body language shift. She goes from someone casually serving coffee to someone who's suddenly very nervous, very concerned. Her demeanor changes completely in a matter of seconds. What the camera can't show is what Keys did next. But we know from his confession, he pulled out a gun. He pointed it at Samantha through the window and demanded money from the till. Samantha put her hands up. She backed away from the window. Then Keys made a demand that revealed his true intent. He told Samantha to turn off the lights inside the coffee stand. She did. The surveillance footage shows Keys moving around to the side of the kiosk, climbing through the window into the small structure. Inside, out of view of the main cameras, he bound Samantha's wrists with zip ties. Then he forced her to walk out of the coffee stand with him. The footage shows them walking westward toward the Denali Street crosswalk. Keys has his arm around Samantha, and to anyone driving by on busy Tudor Road, it might have looked like a couple taking a walk. But Samantha knew the truth. She was being kidnapped. And then she did something incredibly brave. Samantha broke away. She tried to run. Keys chased her down within seconds. He tackled her to the ground on Tudor Road, one of Anchorage's busiest streets. He put his arm around her neck and pressed the gun into her ribs. "The gun has very quiet ammo," he told her. "Don't do anything to make me kill you." Remarkably, despite this violent struggle happening along a busy road, nobody reported seeing anything strange. Nobody called 911. Nobody intervened. Keys forced Samantha across the street to his white pickup truck. He put her inside, bound and terrified. At 8:02 p.m., just 7 minutes after approaching the window, Israel Keys drove away with Samantha Koenig. But he wasn't done at the crime scene yet. And what he did next shows just how brazen and calculating he was. As Keys drove around Anchorage with Samantha bound in his truck, explaining to her that this was a kidnapping for ransom, he realized he'd forgotten something critical. Samantha's cell phone. He needed that phone to send ransom demands. Without it, his plan wouldn't work. So Keys did something that still shocks investigators. He drove back to Common Grounds at approximately 10:30 p.m., 2.5 hours after the abduction, with Samantha still in his truck. Wearing a headlamp, he forced his way back into the coffee stand and retrieved Samantha's phone and the zip tie pieces he'd left behind. The surveillance footage captures this return. It shows Keys inside the small kiosk, cleaning up evidence. And here's the detail that haunts everyone who's seen this footage. Just 4 minutes after Keys left the second time, Samantha's boyfriend Dwayne arrived at the coffee stand to pick her up. For minutes. If Dwayne had arrived even slightly earlier, he might have encountered Keys. He might have saved Samantha, or he might have become another victim. But Dwayne arrived to find the coffee stand empty, the lights off, and his girlfriend gone. Keys drove to another part of Anchorage. Using Samantha's phone, he sent 2 text messages impersonating her. One went to Dwayne. "Just had a bad day. Going away for the weekend." Then Keys forced Samantha to tell him where she lived and give him the PIN to her ATM card. Samantha told him she shared a bank account with her boyfriend, and that the ATM card was in the truck they shared. Keys drove to Samantha's house to retrieve the card. While he was there, something happened that could have changed everything. Dwayne came outside and confronted him. Dwayne yelled at the stranger in his driveway. Then he ran back inside to get help. But Keys was faster. He jumped in his truck and sped away before anyone could stop him or get a good description. Keys drove to an ATM to test the PIN Samantha had given him. It worked. Then he drove to his house, the house where he lived with his girlfriend and young daughter. And he took Samantha to a shed in his front yard. What happened in that shed over the next few hours is almost too disturbing to describe. But you need to hear it, because Samantha's final act of courage, something she said, something she did, would later give investigators a crucial piece of evidence. Evidence that would help them understand they weren't dealing with just a kidnapper. They were dealing with someone who'd done this before, many times before. Inside that shed, Israel Keys bound Samantha, turned up the radio to drown out any sounds, and told her he had a police scanner and would know if she tried to alert the neighbors. Then he went inside to his girlfriend and daughter. And according to his later confession, he sexually assaulted and strangled Samantha Koenig to death in that shed, while his family slept just feet away. It was early morning on February 2, 2012, less than 18 hours after her abduction. Samantha had tried to talk to Keys during her captivity. She tried to convince him to let her go. She told him her family didn't have much money for ransom. She cooperated, believing that cooperation might save her life. But Israel Keys never intended to let her go. After murdering Samantha, Keys left her body in the shed. Then he did something that reveals just how cold and calculated he was. He went on a family vacation. The very next day, February 3rd, Keys drove to the airport with his girlfriend and daughter. They flew to New Orleans and boarded a pre-planned 2-week cruise in the Gulf of Mexico. For 2 weeks, while Samantha's family frantically searched for her, while volunteers distributed flyers all over Anchorage, while her father James appeared at press conferences begging for her safe return, Israel Keys was on a cruise ship, relaxing, enjoying family time, monitoring news coverage of Samantha's disappearance on his laptop. And when he returned to Anchorage on February 19th, he was going to do something that would shock even seasoned FBI investigators. He was going to stage a photograph that would haunt everyone who saw it. A photograph so disturbing, so calculated, that it would become one of the most infamous pieces of evidence in serial killer history. But I'm not going to tell you about that photograph yet. Because first, you need to understand what was happening in Anchorage while Keys was on vacation. You need to know about a father's desperate decision. A decision that would save the investigation, but destroy him in the process. Because James Koenig was about to do something that every parent would do to save their child. He was going to raise money, a lot of money, and he was going to put it exactly where the kidnapper wanted it. But here's what James didn't know, what nobody knew, what would make this one of the most heartbreaking twists in true crime history. The person he was trying to save had been dead the entire time. $70,000. That's how much the community raised to bring Samantha home. $70,000 that went into her bank account. And every single cent was about to fund a serial killer's cross-country escape. But the FBI was watching. And what happened next would turn this from a local kidnapping case into a multi-state manhunt that would expose one of the most prolific killers in American history. While Israel Keys was cruising the Gulf of Mexico, Anchorage was in crisis. And what happened next would set off a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. Because Samantha's father was about to make a decision that would save the investigation, but in the most heartbreaking way possible. Samantha's father, James Koenig, knew immediately something was terribly wrong. When Dwayne called him that night to say Samantha was missing from the coffee stand, James knew his daughter wouldn't just vanish. She was responsible, dedicated. She would never abandon her shift or worry her family. Within hours of Samantha's disappearance, James and the community mobilized. They organized search parties. They distributed missing person flyers all over Anchorage. They set up a reward fund. And the community responded with incredible generosity. Friends, neighbors, even strangers donated money. By mid-February, the reward fund had grown to over $12,000, with more donations coming in daily. Volunteers gave out lime green ribbons, Samantha's favorite color, in exchange for donations. James Koenig held press conferences, pleading for his daughter's safe return. "We need to find her as soon as possible," he told reporters. The desperation in his voice was palpable. Police reviewed the surveillance footage from common grounds and immediately knew this was an abduction. They could see the man approaching the window, see Samantha's body language change, see the lights go out, and see them walking away together. But they couldn't identify the man, and they couldn't find Samantha. For 2 weeks, the search continued. Volunteers searched parks, trails, roads. Police followed every lead. Then Israel Keys returned from his vacation. On February 19, 2012, Keys went back to his shed, back to Samantha's body, And he did something that still disturbs investigators to this day. He sexually assaulted her corpse. Then he took Samantha's body, applied makeup to her face, and used fishing line to sew her eyes open. He positioned her to appear alive and placed a copy of the Anchorage Daily News from February 13th, 4 days old, next to her. He took a Polaroid photograph. Stop and think about what I just told you. Keyes posed a corpse to look alive. He sewed her eyes open with fishing line. He positioned her body. He held up a newspaper. And he took a photo designed to convince everyone she was still breathing. This photo would become one of the most infamous pieces of evidence in FBI history. But here's what nobody realized when they first saw it. Here's the detail that would later make investigators sick. The photo wasn't taken in some remote location. It was taken in Keyes' shed, while his girlfriend and daughter were inside the house, less than 20 feet away. In the photo, his arm is visible holding the newspaper. Samantha appears to be alive, her eyes open, looking at the camera. But she'd been dead for over 2 weeks. This is the photograph that would become infamous. The proof-of-life photo that was actually a photograph of a corpse posed to look alive. Keyes then dismembered Samantha's body and drove to Matanuska Lake, about 40 miles north of Anchorage. He cut a hole in the frozen lake, under the guise of ice fishing, and disposed of Samantha's remains in one of the deepest parts of the lake. And when FBI agents asked him later, "Did you catch any fish while you were there?" Keyes replied, "Yeah, I caught a fish. I took them home and ate them." With the body disposed of, Keyes was ready to execute the final phase of his plan. Ransom. Using Samantha's cell phone, Keyes sent a text message directing police to Connors Bog Park, to a location under Albert, a memorial flyer for a dog. Under that flyer, police found a ransom note demanding $30,000 to be deposited into Samantha's bank account. The note contained the Polaroid photo. To investigators and the family, the photo looked like proof Samantha was still alive. Her eyes were open. She appeared conscious. The newspaper was recent. This meant there was still hope, still time to save her. James Koenig did what any father would do. He put the reward money, now over $70,000 thanks to generous community donations, into Samantha's bank account. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Samantha had been dead the entire time. The community had raised money to save her. James had deposited that money believing it would bring his daughter home. But all they'd done was fund a serial killer's escape. On February 24th, Keyes rented a white Ford Focus and began a massive road trip. He drove that car 2,847 miles through multiple states, making ATM withdrawals along the way with Samantha's card. Each withdrawal was captured on ATM cameras, and each withdrawal showed the same thing, a white Ford Focus in the background. The FBI and Anchorage police were tracking these withdrawals in real time. They issued alerts to law enforcement agencies across the Southwest. White Ford Focus, Texas plates, person of interest in a kidnapping case. But Keyes kept driving, kept withdrawing money, apparently believing he was outsmarting investigators. He wasn't. And on March 13, 2012, in a small town in Texas, a highway patrol officer was about to make a routine traffic stop that would crack open one of the most disturbing serial killer cases in American history. Texas Highway Patrol Corporal Brian Henry was on patrol in Lufkin, Texas, when he spotted a white Ford Focus matching the description from the FBI alert. The vehicle was parked at a hotel. Henry waited for the driver to emerge. When a man got into the car and began driving, Henry followed at a distance. He waited until the vehicle exceeded the speed limit, just slightly, and then pulled it over. The driver was Israel Keyes. During the search of the vehicle, investigators found Samantha's ATM card, her cell phone, and the disguise visible in the ATM surveillance footage. Israel Keyes was arrested, but investigators had no idea what they'd really caught. Not yet, because when they started asking Keyes about Samantha Koenig, when they showed him the evidence, when they looked him in the eye and told him they knew he'd kidnapped her, he started talking, and he didn't stop for 8 months. What came out of those interrogations would shock even the most seasoned FBI agents. Because Samantha wasn't his first victim. She wasn't his second or third. She was victim number 11. At least that's what they believe. And here's where this case takes its darkest turn. A turn that even the FBI didn't see coming. Keyes told investigators something that made their blood run cold. He said he'd been killing for over a decade, traveling thousands of miles, burying weapons years before he'd use them. And here's the part that still haunts them. He told them about something he'd buried near his victims' homes. Something he called kill caches, murder kits, hidden across America, waiting. Some of them are still out there, right now. But that's not even the worst part. Because when Keyes died in his cell 9 months later, he left behind a message, written in his own blood. And what that message revealed would change everything investigators thought they knew about this case. 11 skulls. That's what they found under his bed. 11 human skulls painted in his own blood. Not drawn, painted, carefully, deliberately, each one a face, each one a victim. The FBI believes those 11 skulls represent 11 people Israel Keyes murdered. They've identified 3. That means 8 victims are still out there. Unknown, unfound. Their families don't even know they're dead. But before Keyes painted those skulls, before he took his own life, he sat in an interrogation room for 8 months and told investigators things that would rewrite everything they knew about serial killers. This is what he said. Keyes was extradited back to Alaska. And in an interrogation room at the FBI's Anchorage field office, special agents began questioning him. At first, Keyes denied everything. But investigators had the evidence. They showed him the surveillance footage, the ATM withdrawals, the items found in his car. "We know you kidnapped Samantha Koenig," they told him. "We're going to convict you." And that's when Israel Keyes made a decision that would expose one of the most prolific serial killers in modern American history. He confessed, not just to kidnapping Samantha, not just to murdering her. He confessed to being a serial killer who'd been operating for over a decade. And what he told FBI agents would become some of the most chilling interrogation footage ever recorded. Over the next 8 months, in more than 40 hours of recorded interviews, Israel Keyes walked investigators through a decade of murder. He admitted to murdering Samantha Koenig. He described every detail. The surveillance of the coffee stand, the abduction, taking her to his shed, sexually assaulting her, strangling her to death. He described going on vacation with his family while her body remained in his shed. He explained how he created the fake proof-of-life photo by sewing her eyes open. And then Keyes told investigators where to find Samantha's body. On April 2, 2012, FBI dive teams searched Matanuska Lake. They recovered Samantha Koenig's remains. For James Koenig and his family, it was devastating confirmation. But at least they could bring her home. At least they could lay her to rest. But investigators were realizing something terrifying. Because Keyes kept talking. He admitted to murdering a couple in Essex, Vermont in June 2011. Bill and Lorraine Currier, ages 50 and 55. Keyes broke into their home, found them, drove them to an abandoned farmhouse, shot Bill, and sexually assaulted and strangled Lorraine. And here's where investigators' blood ran cold. Keyes revealed that 2 years before the murders, in 2009, he had buried a murder kit near the Kaya's home in Vermont. Let me repeat that because it's important. 2 years before the murders, he buried weapons near their house in 2009. Then he went back to Alaska, lived his normal life, worked construction, played with his daughter. And in 2011, he flew back to Vermont, dug up those weapons, and used them to kill Bill and Lorraine Currier. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This wasn't even premeditation as we normally understand it. This was premeditation across years, across thousands of miles. This was planning that would make any investigator's blood freeze. Because if he did this once, how many other kill caches did he bury? And how many of them did he actually use? The kit contained weapons, zip ties, duct tape, everything he'd need to commit a murder. He buried it, marked the location, and then waited 2 years before returning to Vermont to kill. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't crimes of passion. This was premeditation on a level FBI agents had never seen before. The FBI later found that cache in Parishville, New York, where Keyes had moved it after the Currier murders. It was a Home Depot bucket filled with weapons and tools, buried in remote woods. Keyes told investigators he had buried up to 12 of these kill caches across the United States. Think about that. 12 plastic buckets filled with murder weapons, buried in forests, parks, and remote locations across America. Some buried years before he'd returned to use them. He admitted to killing people in Washington state while he lived there from 2001 to 2007. He said he killed 4 people, including disposing of at least one body in Lake Crescent by weighing it down with anchors and dumping it in more than 100 feet of water. He admitted to killing someone in upstate New York in April 2009. He admitted to robbing multiple banks to finance his killing sprees. He admitted to burglarizing 30 homes across the country. And he hinted at many more victims he refused to name. Special Agent Jolene Godin described what it was like interviewing him. You could be in a room with him and it was like you were in the room with your neighbor. And then there were other times where the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Keyes showed no remorse. In fact, he seemed energized when describing his crimes. His body would shake with excitement. He'd rub his arms on the chair rests so vigorously that his handcuffs scraped the wood finish off. Once I started, there was nothing else like it, he told investigators. He explained that he studied other serial killers extensively. He knew their methods, their mistakes. When asked about Alaska-based serial killer Robert Hansen, Keyes replied enthusiastically, "Yeah, I know all about him. I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine." He called it a hobby. Studying serial killers was a hobby. Keyes told investigators he chose victims completely at random. Parks, campgrounds, hiking trails, isolated locations where he could abduct people without witnesses. Not as much to choose from, he told investigators. But there's also no witnesses, really. He admitted he enjoyed what he did. He told agents if he hadn't been caught, he would have continued kidnapping and murdering people indefinitely. But there was one thing Keyes did care about, his daughter. He told investigators he wanted to avoid publicity because of the negative attention his young daughter might face. He wanted to be executed within a year so his daughter wouldn't have to grow up knowing the details of what he'd done. He negotiated with prosecutors. He'd give them information about other victims if they agreed to certain conditions. Death penalty, quick execution, no public release of details that would hurt his daughter. Prosecutors were willing to negotiate. They wanted to identify those other victims. They wanted to give closure to families. But Israel Keyes never gave them that chance. And what happened next, what they found in his jail cell, would reveal the true scope of his crimes in the most disturbing way possible. On December 1, 2012, while awaiting trial in the Anchorage Correctional Complex, Keyes managed to obtain a razor blade. Using that blade, he cut himself and bled to death. But before he died, he created something that haunts investigators to this day. Prison officials found sheets of paper under his bed. On those papers, painted in his own blood, were 11 human skulls. 11 faces looking back at them. And written at the bottom, also in blood, "We are one." The FBI believes those 11 skulls represent 11 victims. They've only identified 3, Samantha Koenig, Bill Currier, and Lorraine Currier. 8 victims remain unknown. 8 families who don't know their loved ones are dead. 8 people whose remains have never been found. And here's the plot twist that nobody, not the FBI, not the prosecutors, not the victims' families, saw coming. When Keyes died, he took all the answers with him. The locations of the bodies, the identities of the victims, the dates of the murders, the states where they occurred. All of it died with him in that jail cell. And now, more than a decade later, the FBI is still searching, still trying to identify those 8 unknown victims, still trying to give closure to families who may not even know they need it. Because somewhere out there, 8 families are wondering what happened to someone they love. 8 families who have no idea their loved one crossed paths with Israel Keyes. And that's the most disturbing part of this entire case. But the story doesn't end with Keyes' death. It doesn't end with those 8 unknown victims. Because what happened after Keyes died changed how law enforcement investigates serial killers. It changed how the FBI approaches cold cases. and it changed one father's life forever. James Koenig lost his daughter, but what he did next turned that grief into something that's saving lives right now. And the FBI? They're still following leads, still investigating, still finding new evidence more than a decade later. Because those kill caches keys buried? They're still out there, and one of them might be in your town. Right now, as you're watching this, there are FBI agents working on the Israel Keys case, analyzing DNA, following up on tips, investigating cold cases in states Keys visited. Because every unsolved disappearance from 2001 to 2012 is now a potential Keys victim. Every missing person from Washington, Vermont, New York, Alaska, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, anywhere Keys traveled, could be victim number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. The FBI has created a timeline, a map, a detailed record of everywhere Keys went for 15 years. And they're asking for your help. Because you might know something. You might remember something. You might be the person who finally identifies one of those 8 unknown victims. More than a decade has passed since Israel Keys took his own life. But for the FBI, for Samantha Koenig's family, and for the families of unknown victims, the investigation isn't over. It may never be over. The FBI has released thousands of pages of documents, hundreds of hours of interview recordings, and an interactive map showing Keys' travels from 1997 to 2012. They've held press conferences. They've asked for the public's help. If we have a missing person identified in a particular area, we work closely with that local police department to either connect the person to Keys or not, Special Agent Godin explained. We have his DNA. They're using that DNA to test against evidence in unsolved murders across the country. They're investigating cold cases in every state Keys visited. But it's a painstaking process. Keys was meticulous about covering his tracks. He rarely left evidence behind. He disposed of bodies in remote locations or in deep water where they'd never be found. Special Agent Catherine Nelson, who has taken over the investigation, remains determined. It won't be easy by any means, and it may take a long time, she said. But I'll never give up trying. The FBI has identified one possible 4th victim, Deborah Feldman, a 49-year-old woman who disappeared from New Jersey in April 2009. Keys admitted to killing someone on the East Coast around that time, but they haven't confirmed it yet. Some investigations have focused on Julie Marie Harris, a 12-year-old girl who disappeared in Colville, Washington, in 1996. Keys lived in the area and was questioned about her case, but he never confirmed or denied involvement. The Boca killer crimes in Florida in 2007. Multiple unsolved murders in Washington state. For families of missing people across America, Keys' crimes raise a terrible question. Could my loved one be one of his victims? The FBI has a message for anyone who might find a kill cache. Do not touch it. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI immediately. For Samantha Koenig's family, the years since her murder have been a journey through grief and toward purpose. James Koenig was devastated by the loss of his daughter. We deserved our day in court and we didn't get it, he said after Keys' suicide. But James didn't let his grief consume him. He created a non-profit organization called Seeking Alaska's Missing. The organization works to raise awareness about cold cases and missing persons in Alaska. Through this work, James has helped other families navigate the same nightmare he experienced. He's kept Samantha's memory alive by helping others. Samantha's sister, Kaylee Christensen, has also remained active in advocacy work. She regularly organizes fundraisers for missing persons organizations. At Matanuska Lake, where Samantha's body was recovered, there's now a memorial plaque dedicated to Samantha Koenig and all of Israel Keys' victims, known and unknown. This case is about them and their lives and the lives that they have not been able to live, Special Agent Godin said. Israel Keys wanted to be remembered as the smartest serial killer who ever lived. Someone more calculated than Bundy, more careful than BTK, more successful than any killer in history. But in the end, he made the same mistake they all make. He got cocky. He got greedy. He killed too close to home. Samantha Koenig's abduction happened in his own city. The surveillance cameras captured his face. Using her ATM card across multiple states left a digital trail. And when that Texas Highway Patrol officer pulled him over, his decade-long killing spree came to an end. The 11 skulls drawn in blood remain one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in FBI history. 11 lives taken, 8 still unidentified. But here's what Israel Keyes got wrong about everything. He thought he'd be remembered as the most meticulous serial killer of the 21st century. He thought his name would go down in history alongside the killers he studied. But that's not what happened. Today, when people talk about this case, they don't talk about Israel Keyes first. They talk about Samantha Koenig, the 18-year-old who fought back, who tried to run, whose courage in her final hours gave investigators the clues they needed. They talk about James Koenig, who turned his grief into action and now helps other families find their missing loved ones. They talk about a community in Anchorage that came together to search for a girl they'd never met. And they talk about 8 families still waiting for answers. The investigation continues. The FBI hasn't given up, and neither has Samantha's family. In memory of Samantha Tesla Koenig, August 30th, 1993 to February 2nd, 2012. And all the unknown victims of Israel Keyes who deserve to be found and brought home. If you have any information about Israel Keyes' travels or potential victims, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit fbi.gov/tips. Because 8 families are still waiting, still hoping, still searching for someone they love.